I have to admit, I don't believe in peace. I don't believe in peace, and I don't think you should either. So I come from a small town called Battleground, Washington. Anyone ever heard of it? Wow, one person. I'm so sorry. Yeah, for the rest of you, you're lucky. It's a really boring place. But I remember when I was 8 years old, and I saw Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, as you do, and it was in New York. And I remember seeing that opening, the opening scene of the movie and thinking, I'm going to be there one day. But where I was, in Clark County, this small area, our idea of religious diversity was having one Catholic church on one side of the county and one Mormon temple on the other side. So this was not a place of much difference. And so for me, growing up as an evangelical Christian, I had a lot of questions about the other. And suddenly, I remember when 9/11 happened, I was in high school. It gave a very quick jolt to our understanding of who we are in the world. I had never really thought about what's going on in other countries or what's happening in our communities. But what I did think about afterwards was, what is it about my religious community that fears these other people that they've never met? Fast forward, I moved to New York. I went to NYU, thought I'd be a big record producer, had a lot of fun sort of in that scene, but I was still trying to answer these questions in the back of my mind. And in such a hyper-diverse place as New York, I had this great opportunity to meet people very different than myself, but I didn't know what to do with those experiences or what that could mean for other people. So my sophomore year, I went abroad, went to Egypt and did independent research on Christian-Islam relations. And while I was there, I was really struck by, people coexisted, there was tolerance, and by and large, people got along. But all it took was for somebody to throw the rock through a window of a church or a mosque for 6 to be dead by morning. So it struck me, how is this possible? How can these people, by and large, get along so well, yet this violence is possible? So I became inspired to get involved in interfaith work, came back to New York. And when I got to New York, I started meeting with interfaith organizations. And I found it was mostly religious leaders doing dialogue. But when I remember the religious violence I saw in Egypt, it was typically young people. So I founded World Faith out of the frustration that I don't believe old people talking can counter young people taking action. What we've created is an organization that basically mobilizes religiously diverse young people to do community service projects. The reason for this is really focused on the idea of getting young people to be stakeholders in their communities. And it really ties into our deeper methodology. We've identified 2 drivers of conflict. Number 1, narratives of conflict. And number 2, the economic context for conflict. So let me break that down. A narrative of conflict is this idea that there is us, there is you, that we are better than you, and that maybe you don't deserve to live. Otherism is not only in religion, we find it in tribes and nations and even sports teams sometimes. And this is something that I think we need to understand is ingrained into our human nature. But it can be countered. When we talk about dialogue, another word I'm not a big fan of, we think of 2 people sitting across from a table trying to agree to something. What we want to do is get people side by side volunteering together in a project on the shared value of service. That is transformational. That's humanization, and it doesn't require us to come up with any final peace solutions. It just requires us to humanize one another. For me, this is something that it definitely sticks out as important. I remember, I've seen this in my own life. I'm an evangelical Christian, my wife is Muslim. And about 3 years ago, before I was married, I was visiting my sister in Tennessee. And while I was there, we were talking about the idea of a Christian household. My sister says, we have a Christian household. I say, okay, what does that mean? We want everything to be Christian in our household, nothing else. It's like, okay, would you let somebody from another religion pray in your home? My sister said, no. I said, I'm marrying Medina. Medina's a practicing Muslim. Are you telling me you wouldn't let Medina practice in your own home? And my sister said, no, I wouldn't let her. So we continued the conversation. And about 30 seconds, maybe a minute later, my sister was like, no, wait. Medina could pray here. Muslims believe in the same God as Christians. Now, did my sister have a theological breakthrough? Probably not. But it outlines what happens when we have to say no to a human face. That small change, just one relationship, it changes and pivots the whole context. The second aspect I talked about was economic drivers. So there's a writer, Robin Wright, who has a book called Dreams and Shadows. And she outlines that a society or an individual will act according to if they're thinking forward or thinking behind. Somebody who has dreams of a better life, who's working towards maybe getting another degree or wants to save up for retirement, they're not very likely to lash out, simply because there's too many reasons for them not to. There's too many things that they're looking forward to. But somebody who feels that they or their community has been wronged, that things were so much better and we don't have that anymore, they start to look back, and their bitterness pushes them towards the ability to engage in conflict and violence. So, great example of this is one of our chapters is in Nigeria. And Nigeria, we've got the narrative of conflict, Boko Haram, a lot of tension between Christians and Muslims, and there's tons of peace building work, and they're doing good work. I don't want to take away from that. But interestingly enough, the British Council put out a report saying the #1 indicator whether or not Nigeria erupts into civil war is if they can create 26 million jobs in the next 10 years. So no matter how good the peace building work is, we'll never be able to actually get across the tipping point of this conflict. But who's going to show up to a new job they've got through a work program if they're afraid to take public transportation? So we can't have development without peace building. We can't have peace building without development. Secondly, it has to be with the youth. If it's not with the youth, we're not going to engage in the underlying issues, because typically, you take Nigeria, life expectancy right now is 49 years old, and the average age is 17. Youth unemployment for those under 30 is, I believe, about 35%. So there is a huge opportunity for people to feel disenfranchised, like they're not stakeholders in their communities. So that presents a big challenge for us. But also, when you see development and peace building work, there is a tendency for it to be just leaving young people out. And even if it includes young people, it doesn't do so in a way that is, they're the target of the programs. And if you're the target of a NGO program, it means you're the problem. So we're really focused on getting young people to be the leaders and actors of this movement of interfaith action. So today, now, we're working in 16 countries. Our volunteers are taking on issues, MDG-oriented issues, such as poverty alleviation, women's empowerment, public health, and education. Last year, we just got the numbers recently, so I'm excited about this. We found out we mobilized 3,000 volunteers to do over 50,000 hours of service. So, I said earlier, I don't believe in peace, and I stand by that. But I do believe in de-incentivizing violence. So what does that mean? For us, moving forward, it means that we have a chance to really look into our own communities and how we can challenge ourselves to engage in these issues in new ways. And it goes even beyond the work that we're doing at World Faith. I challenge you all, if we really take all this and we apply it to the MENA region, we'll see that there's conflicts being driven without incentives that are being addressed. So how many here have heard of the Second Congolese War? Okay, got 1, 2, 3. Okay, some of you heard from me say this yesterday. So how many of you have heard of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? Raise your hand. If your hand's not up, I don't know why you're here. So, right. There is a narrative of conflict so salient that many of us who've never been to the region have a very strong idea in our mind. Now, I want to be very careful. There's no hierarchy of conflict or one person's suffering is more important than another. But it should disturb us about ourselves that 2.5 to 4.5 million people died in our lifetime, and we don't know much about it. Yet there's another conflict that we seem to read every single day. Why is that? So we should really evaluate ourselves, both individually and societally. Why does one have so much saliency with us and not another? And then secondly, there's a conflict also, an economic driver of money here. There are people in power on both sides, and many actors, who benefit from a large amount of aid pouring into these countries of different sorts. And if you're getting paid through a government that's getting money from another government because of a conflict, what incentive do you have to end the conflict? So when we think about this, if we are hearing the same story that our grandparents told our parents, the only way that our children won't be telling our grandchildren this if we can engage in the underlying economic issues. Thank you.